Hey guys, welcome to another video from Historic Militaria. Today we're going to be looking at the Romanian M38 or M39 helmet, depending what you want to call it. I've heard it called both, and there's also a version called the 3942, which we'll be taking a look at. And we'll also take a look at the difference between the original M38 or 39, we'll call it the M39 for the rest of this video, and the Romanian M73, which replaced it, obviously, in 1973, and is not a World War II design. So the first thing we're going to look at is you're going to notice that this has this lip here when you lay it flat, whereas your M73 has a much less pronounced lip and it lays much more flat. Also, it does not flare out in the back nearly as much. Take a look at this here. As you can see, the M73 has a pretty small skirt here, whereas your M39 flares out greatly here. So that's just an easy way to tell the difference. The other thing is your M73s are generally going to have stamps here, which are going to give you the date and I believe the heat treat, or at least the metal metal lot number that it came from. So always look in the back here if someone's selling you a Romanian helmet and you're not really sure of which one it is. If you see numbers back here and you also notice that it does not have that lip, you're looking at an M73. The other thing I will tell you is that this is a raw-edged helmet. If you look, this is not a rolled edge. This is just, the steel is just sharp and left sharp. It's not rolled under. Whereas your M39 is. It's got this rolled edge to it here. So just a little bit sort of an older style of manufacture and just something to always consider. The other thing is obviously the liners are going to be different. This is the M73 liner. It's got a very standard type Cold War era chin strap, which is a pretty nice chin strap, pretty involved, keeps it on the soldier's head nicely. It's got just typical Soviet style liner in there. And then you look at your original M39, totally different. Has a very basic chin strap, if it'll come out. And just like that, it's just a single chin strap, whereas this is a much more involved mechanism. Anyway, without further ado, let's take a look at the M39 and give you a little bit of its history. This one is actually a World War II era one. This one was made in the Netherlands on contract for the Romanian military, starting in about 1938, I believe. There was an order placed for 800,000 of them. I believe something like 638,000 were actually delivered. And these are pretty interesting helmets because they were just Dutch M34s, and you can find Dutch M34s that are going to be identical to this, except they're going to have a crest in the front with the Dutch emblem. The early Romanian ones also had the Romanian emblem for the Romanian king, and that would be an oval emblem here that would have had, I believe, a C and a C sort of intertwined on them. But later, after the Germans had taken over and Romania was fighting with Axis, they did away with that because the king had been forced into exile, and you had these standard plain helmets. So this is the typical Romanian green that would have been painted during World War II. You notice it's got the slot here so that you can sling it to your pack. Just a good way to carry it. The M73s actually had that. The Dutch M34s have that as well. And you've got your standard, larger rivets, which you're going to see on sort of your older helmets. The M73s have much smaller, cleaner rivets. These are big and typical of World War II era helmets. And looking inside it, you've got a very standard Dutch style liner with this sort of ribbed leather. You'd see something similar on the Dutch helmets that were made at the time as well. And this has got like a little, I'm not really sure, I believe this is a little adjustment skirt that you can have here with your adjustment belt as well. And your standard 6-tongued liner with your adjusting string here. And if you pull the liner out a little bit, you can see there's orangish colored pads in there. Those are just like felt to sort of cushion things, and a leather band that just keeps everything together. That's what keeps the liner in. And just all in all, a pretty basic but well-constructed helmet that saw quite a bit of service with the Romanians, especially on the Eastern Front. These are fairly uncommon. You don't see a lot of them in the Western Front area, just because the Romanians typically fought in the East, and most of them were lost there, and then they went to Romania after the war. They were repurposed. There's certainly a lot of use after World War II, even though it seems like Romania adopted the SSH-40 Soviet helmet in the post-war years to a large extent until the M73 came along. And the Germans also seized, it seems like, a lot of Dutch M34 helmets, and this is potentially one of those, and they sent them all to the Romanian soldiers who were fighting with the Germans. And this is a typical example of one during the war that would have been sent along to Romania for use by Romanian soldiers. Very much the same, except your rivet pattern is different. You've got much smaller rivets. You've got the large rivets on the originals, and the later ones have these smaller rivets. You'll also notice that the rear rivets are going to be different too. The rear rivets on these, again, much larger. These are pretty tiny, very much like the later M73s, and they're also sort of crudely applied. And the liner is going to look something like a German style liner with your typical German looking liner holes and ventilation holes here, and a different kind of chin strap, a little bit nicer, a little bit lighter leather, and certainly not the black that you see on the Dutch made with the Dutch type liner examples. This one also does in fact have a date in the liner of 1942. Just to give you an idea, I've heard that around 1942 to 1943, the majority of these were being sent to Romania or to the Romanian soldiers by the Germans. And that's just kind of gives you an example of another variant that you may come across if you're looking at Romanian M39s. But there's definitely a lot of variation. A lot of them will have the crest still there, or if they had the crest originally, a lot of them were removed in Axis use, so you might see remnants of a crest. Neither of these seems to have that. So I do believe these were both made after about 1940 to 41, when it seems like that crest was not being put on the helmets. So again, they're very interesting helmets. They are not particularly easy to come across here in the West. If you know more about them, or you've got some comments, I would definitely love to hear anything you might have to say about them. I'm not saying my information is completely accurate. I know it is fairly accurate and will give you an idea of these, but of course, chime in if you are a collector or you have a couple. I'd just love to hear about it anyway. As always, remember to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.